The new man stands looking a minute to get the setup of the day room. One side of the room, younger patients, known as acutes, because the doctor figured them still sick enough to be fixed, practice arm wrestling and card tricks where you add and subtract and count down so many and it's a certain card. Billy Bibbit tries to learn to roll a tailor-made cigarette, and Martini walks around discovering things under the table and chairs. The acutes move around a lot. They tell jokes to each other and snicker in their fists. Nobody ever dares let loose and laugh. The whole staff would be up with their notebooks and a lot of questions, and they write letters with yellow, runty chewed pencils. They spy on each other. Sometimes one man says something about himself that he didn't aim to let slip, and one of his buddies at the table where he said it yawns and gets up and slides over to the big logbook by the nurse's station and writes down the piece of information he heard. Of therapeutic interest to the whole ward is what the big nurse says the book is for, but I know she's just waiting to get enough evidence to have some guy reconditioned at the main building, overhauled in the head to straighten out the trouble. The guy that wrote the piece of information in the logbook, he gets a star by his name on the roll and gets to sleep late the next day. Across the room from the acutes are the calls of the Combine's product, the chronics. Not in the hospital, these to get fixed, but just to keep them from walking around in the street giving the product a bad name. Chronics are in for good, the staff concedes. Chronics are divided into walkers, like me, can still get around if you keep them fed, and then there's wheelers and vegetables. What the chronics are, or most of us, are machines with flaws inside that can't be repaired, flaws born in or flaws beat in over so many years of the guy running head on into solid things that by the time the hospital found him, he was bleeding rust in some vacant lot. But there are some of us chronics that the staff made a couple of mistakes on years back. Some of us who were acutes when we came in, and we got changed over. Ellis is a chronic. Came in an acute and got fouled up bad when they overloaded him in the filthy brain murdering room that black boys call the shock shop. Now he's nailed against the wall in the same condition. They lifted him off the table for the last time in. Arms out, palms cupped, with the same horror on his face. He's nailed like that on the wall, like a stuffed trophy. They pull the nails when it's time to eat or time to drive him into bed, when they want him to move, so as I can mop up the puddle where he stands. At the old place, he stood so long in one spot, the piss ate the floor and the beams away from under him, and he kept falling through to the ward below, giving them all kinds of census headaches down there when roll check came around. Ruckley, he's another chronic, came in a few years back as an acute, but him they overloaded in a different way. They made a mistake in one of the head installations. He was being a holy nuisance all over the place, kicking the black boys and biting the student nurses on the legs, so they took him away to be fixed. They strapped him to that table, and the last anyone ever saw him for a while was just before they shut the door on him. He winked, just before the door closed, and told the black boys as they backed away from him, "You'll pay for this, you damn tar babies." And they brought him back to the ward 2 weeks later, bald in the front of his face, an oily purple bruise, and 2 little button-sized plugs stitched, one above each eye. You can see by his eyes how they burned him out over there. His eyes are all smoked up and gray and deserted inside like blown fuses. All day now he won't do a thing but hold an old photograph up in front of his burned out face, turn it over and over in his cold fingers, and the picture wore gray as his eyes on both sides, with all his handling till you can't tell anymore what he even used to be. The staff, now, they consider Ruckley one of their failures, but I'm not sure what he's better off than if the installation had been perfected. The installations they do nowadays are generally successful. The technicians got more skill and experience. No more of the buttonholes in the forehead, no cutting at all. They go into the eye sockets. Sometimes a guy goes over for an installation, leaves the ward mean and mad and snapping to the whole world, and comes back a few weeks later with black and blue eyes, like he's been in a fist fight, and he's the sweetest, nicest, best behaved thing you ever saw. You'll maybe even go home in a month or two. A hat pulled low over the face of a sleepwalker wandering around in a simple, happy dream. A success, they say, but I say he's just another robot for the Combine. Might be better off as a failure. Like Ruckley sitting there fumbling and drooling over his picture. He never does much else. The dwarf black boy gets a rise out of him from time to time by leaning close and asking, "Say, Ruckley, what you figure your little wife is doing in town tonight?" Ruckley's head comes up. Memory whispers someplace in that jumbled machinery. He turns red and his veins clog up at one end. This puffs him up so he can just barely make a little whistling sound in his throat. Bubbles squeeze out of the corner of his mouth. He's working his jaw so hard to say something. When he finally does get to where he can say a few words, it's a low, choking noise to make your skin crawl. "Fuck the wife. Fuck the wife." And passes out on the spot from the effort. Ellis and Ruckley are the youngest chronics. Colonel Matterson is the oldest, an old petrified cavalry soldier from the First War, who was given to lifting the skirts of passing nurses with his cane or teaching some kind of history out of the text of his left hand to anybody that'll listen. He's the oldest on the ward, but not the one that's been here the longest. His wife brought him in a few years back when she got to where she wasn't up to tending him any longer. I'm the one been here on the ward the longest, since the Second World War. I've been here on the ward longer than anybody, longer than any of the other patients. The big nurse has been here longer than me. The chronics and the acutes don't generally mingle. Each stays on his own side of the day room the way the black boys want it. The black boys say it's more orderly that way and let everybody know that's the way they'd like it to stay. They move us in after breakfast and look at the grouping and nod. "That's right, gentlemen. That's the way. Now let's keep it that way." Actually, there isn't much need for them to say anything because, other than me, the chronics don't move around much, and the acutes say they just as leave, stay over on their own side. Give reasons like the chronic side smells worse than a dirty diaper. But I know it isn't the stink that keeps them away from the chronic side so much as they don't like to see you reminded what's here that could happen to them someday. The big nurse recognizes his fear and knows how to put it to use. She'll point out to an acute whenever he goes into a sulk that you boys be good boys and cooperate with the staff policy which is engineered for your cure, or you'll end up over on that side. Everybody on the ward is proud of the way the patients cooperate. We got a little brass tablet tacked to a piece of maple wood that's printed on it. "Congratulations for getting along with the smallest number of personnel of any ward in the hospital." It's a prize for cooperation. It's hung on the wall right above the logbook, right square in the middle between the chronics and the acutes. This new red-headed admission, McMurphy, knows right away he's not a chronic. After he checks the day room over a minute, he sees he's meant for the acute side and goes right for it, grinning and shaking hands with everybody he comes to. At first I see it making everybody over there feel uneasy, with all his kidding and joking, and with the brassy way he hollers at the black boys, who's still after him with the thermometer, especially that big, wide-open laugh of his. Dials twitch in the control panel at the sound of it. The acutes look spooked and uneasy when he laughs, the way kids look in a schoolroom when one ornery kid is raising too much hell with the teacher out of the room, and they're all scared that the teacher might pop back in and take it into her head to make them all stay after.